forgiveness, tolerance, and dialogue. Forgiveness. Humans are creatures with both exceptional qualities and faults. Until the first human appeared, no living creature carried such opposites within its nature. At the same time as humans beat their wings in the firmaments of heaven, they can, with sudden deviation, become monsters that descend to the pits of hell. It is futile to look for any relationship between these frightening descents and ascents. These are extremes because their cause and effect take place on very different planes. At times, humans are like a field of wheat bending in the wind. At other times, although they appear as dignified as a plane tree, they can topple over, not to rise again. Just as the times that the angels envy them are not few, neither are the times when even the devils are shocked by their behavior. For humans, whose natures contain so many highs and lows, even if committing evil is not essential to their nature, it is inevitable. Even if becoming sullied is accidental, it is likely. For a creature which is going to spoil his good name, forgiveness is paramount. However valuable it is to ask for and expect forgiveness, and to bemoan the things that have escaped us, forgiving is that much greater an attribute and virtue. It is wrong to think of forgiveness as being separate from virtue, or of virtue as being separate from forgiveness. As the well-known adage says, to err is human, to forgive divine. And how well this has been said. Being forgiven means being repaired. It consists of a return to our essence and finding ourselves again. For this reason, the most pleasing action in the eyes of infinite mercy is any activity pursued amidst the palpitations of this return and search. All of creation, animate and inanimate, was introduced to forgiveness through humanity. Just as God showed his attribute of forgiveness through humanity, he also put the beauty of forgiveness into the human heart. While the first man dealt a blow to his essence through his fall, something which was almost a requirement of his human nature, forgiveness came from the heavens because of the remorse he felt in his conscience and because of his sincere pleas. Humans have preserved gifts, such as hope and consolation, which they have obtained from their ancestors over the centuries. Whenever people err, by boarding the magical transport of seeking forgiveness and by surmounting the shame caused by their sins and the despair caused by their actions, they are able to attain infinite mercy and are shown the generosity that is involved in veiling their eyes to the sins of others. Thanks to their hope for forgiveness, humans can rise above the dark clouds that threaten their horizon and seize the opportunity to see light in their world. Those fortunate ones who are aware of the uplifting wings of forgiveness live their lives amidst melodies that please their spirits. It is impossible for people who have given their heart to seeking forgiveness not to think of forgiving others. Just as they desire to be forgiven, they also desire to forgive. Is it possible for someone not to forgive if they know that salvation from the fires of suffering caused by his or her mistakes in the inner world is possible by drinking deeply from the river of forgiveness? Is it possible for people not to forgive if they know that the road to being forgiven passes through the act of forgiving? Those who forgive are honored with forgiveness. One who does not know how to pardon cannot hope to be pardoned. Those who close the road to tolerance for humanity are monsters that have lost their humanity. These brutes that have never once been inclined to take themselves to tasks for their sins will never experience the high solace of forgiveness. Jesus said to a crowd that was waiting rocks in hand to stone a sinner, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone." Can anyone with a sin on their conscience still be inclined to stone another if they truly understand this idea? If only those unfortunate ones of today who spend their lives putting the lives of others to the litmus test could understand this. In fact, if the reason for stoning a person is our malice and hatred, if this is the reason why we have passed judgment on them, then it is not possible to pass this sentence on them. The truth is, unless we destroy the idols in our ego as courageously as Abraham destroyed the idols, we will never be able to make a correct decision in the name of ourselves or in the name of others. Forgiveness emerged with and reached perfection through humanity. In this respect, we can witness the greatest forgiveness and the most impeccable tolerance in the greatest exemplars of humanity. Malice and hatred are the seeds of hell that have been scattered among humans by evil spirits. Unlike those who encourage malice and hatred and turn the earth into a pit of hell, we should take this forgiveness and run to the rescue of our people who are confronted by countless troubles and who are being continually pushed toward the abyss. The past few centuries have been turned into the most unpleasant and foul years by the excesses of those who do not know forgiveness or recognize tolerance. It is impossible not to be chilled by the thought that these unfortunate ones could rule the future. For this reason, the greatest gift that the generation of today can give their children and grandchildren is to teach them how to forgive even when confronted by the worst behavior and the most disturbing events. However, thinking of forgiving monstrous, evil people who enjoy making others suffer would be disrespectful to the idea of forgiveness. We have no right to forgive them. Forgiving them would be disrespectful to humanity. I do not believe that there is any probability that anyone could see an act that is disrespectful to forgiveness as being acceptable. A generation which was raised in a particular past under constant hostile pressure saw continuous horror and brutality in the dark world into which they had been pushed. They saw blood and pus, not just in the dark of night, but also at the break of day. What could be learned from a society whose voice, breath, thought, and smile were tainted with blood? The things that were presented to this generation were the complete opposite and totally contrary to what they needed and what they desired. This generation took on a second nature caused by years of neglect and misleading suggestions. The disorder and sedition caused by these became a flood. If only by now we could have understood them. Alas, where is such insight? We believe that forgiveness and tolerance will heal most of our wounds, if only this celestial instrument will be in the hands of those who understand its language. Otherwise, the incorrect methods of behavior, those used up until now, will cause many complications and will only confuse us from now on. Diagnose the illness, then set out to treat it. Do you think any ointment will be a cure for every wound? Tolerance and liberality. Be as vast as the oceans and take every soul to your bosom. Let faith keep you alert. Cherish a never-ending affection for humanity and leave no broken heart forgotten or ignored. Applaud the good for their goodness. Appreciate those who have believing hearts and be kind to them. Approach unbelievers so gently that their envy and hatred melt away. Like a Messiah, revive people with your breath. Remember that you travel the best road and follow the prophet, an exalted guide. Be mindful that you have his guidance through the most perfect and expressive revelation. Be fair-minded and balanced in your judgment, for many people do not enjoy these blessings. Fend off evil with goodness and ignore rudeness. The attitude of a person reveals their character. Favor tolerance and be magnanimous toward those who do not know better. The most distinctive feature of a soul overflowing with faith is to love all love that is expressed in deeds, and to feel enmity for all deeds in which enmity is expressed. To hate everything is a sign of insanity or of infatuation with Satan. Accept how God treats you. Make it the measure by which you treat others, so that you may represent the truth among them and be free of the fear of loneliness in either world. Only those who do not use their reason, or who have succumbed to plain stupidity and desires of the flesh, are convinced that believers might harm them. Apply to a spiritual master to stir up your heart and fill your eyes with tears. Judge your worth in the Creator's sight by how much space He occupies in your heart, and your worth in people's eyes by how you treat them. Do not neglect the truth even for a moment, and yet still be a human among other humans. Take note of and be attentive to any behavior that causes you to love others. Then remind yourself that behaving in the same way will cause them to love you. Always behave decently and be alert. Do not allow your carnal self to be a referee in any contest, for it will rule that everyone but you is sinful and unfortunate. Such a judgment, according to the word of the prophet, the most truthful, signifies your destruction. Be strict and implacable with your carnal self, and be relenting and lenient toward others. To preserve your credit, honor, and love for the sake of the truth, hate for the sake of the truth, and be open-hearted toward the truth. Tolerance. As a nation, we are experiencing an intense fervor of recovery and revival. If a wind of opposition does not hinder us, the coming years will be our years of becoming. However, there are differences in methods of recovery and revival. There has been a difficulty in arriving at a mutual agreement as to which methods we should accept and which we should reject regarding the renewals in our intellectual and cultural life over the last few centuries. Also, there has been a difference in style and method used in blowing a new spirit into society. The nuances that appear in building a bridge between the past and the future fill us with hope, yet at the same time, it seems that troubled days await us. Thus, while walking toward the future as a whole nation, tolerance is our safest refuge and our fortress against the handicaps that arise from schism, factions, and the difficulties inherent in reaching mutual agreement, troubles that lie waiting at every corner. We should have such tolerance that we are able to close our eyes to the faults of others, to have respect for different ideas, and to forgive everything that is forgivable. In fact, even when faced with violations of our inalienable rights, we should remain respectful to human values and try to establish justice. Even before the coarsest thoughts and the crudest ideas that we find impossible to share, with the caution of a prophet and without losing our temper, we should respond with mildness. This mildness is presented in the Quran as gentle words. It will touch the hearts of others. This mildness is the result of a tender heart, a gentle approach, and mild behavior. We should have so much tolerance that we can benefit from opposing ideas in that they force us to keep our heart, spirit, and conscience active and aware, even if these ideas do not directly or indirectly teach us anything. Tolerance, a term which we sometimes use in place of the words respect, mercy, generosity, or forbearance, is the most essential element of moral systems. It is a very important source of spiritual discipline and a celestial virtue of perfected people. Under the lens of tolerance, the merits of believers attain new depths and extend to infinity. Mistakes and faults become insignificant and wither away until they are so small that they can be placed into a thimble. In fact, the treatment of He who is beyond time and space always passes through the prism of tolerance, and we wait for it to embrace us and all of creation. Because of the broadness of this embrace, when a corrupt woman who had given water to a thirsty dog touched the knocker of the door of mercy, she found herself in a corridor extending to chastity and heaven. Similarly, due to the deep love he felt for God and his messenger, a drunk suddenly shook himself free and attained companionship of the prophet. In another example, with the smallest of divine favors, a bloody murderer was saved from his monstrous psychosis and headed toward the highest rank, a rank that far surpassed his natural ability and one that in the end he actually reached. We all want everyone to see us through this lens, and we expect the breezes of forgiveness and pardon to constantly blow in our surroundings. All of us want to refer our past and present to the climate of tolerance and forbearance that melts, transforms, cleans, and purifies, and then to walk toward the future securely, without feeling any anxiety. We do not want our past to be criticized or our future to be darkened because of our present. All of us expect love and respect for a whole lifetime, hope for tolerance and forgiveness, and want to be embraced with feelings of liberality and affection. We expect tolerance and forgiveness from our parents in response to mischievousness at home, from our teachers in response to our misbehavior at school, from those innocent victims toward whom we have acted unjustly and oppressed, from the judge and the prosecutor in court, from our army commanders, from police officers, and from the judge of judges in the highest tribunal. However, deserving what we expect is very important. Anyone who does not forgive has no right to expect forgiveness. Everyone will receive disrespect to the degree that he has been disrespectful. Anyone who does not love is not worthy of being loved. Those who do not embrace all of humankind with tolerance and forgiveness have lost their worthiness to receive forgiveness and pardon. An unfortunate one who curses others does not have the right to expect respect from others. Those who curse will be cursed, and those who beat will be beaten. If true Muslims observed such Quranic principles as the following, and were to go on their way and tolerate curses deep in their breasts, then others would appear in order to implement the justice of destiny on those who cursed us. When they meet hollow words or unseemly behavior, they pass them by with dignity. Al-Furqan 25:72. If you behave tolerantly, overlook and forgive their faults. At-Tagabun 64:14. In countries rife with corruption, intolerance, and mercilessness, such things as freedom of thought, polite criticism, and the exchange of ideas according to norms of equity and fair-minded debate are absent. It would be meaningless to talk of the results of logic and inspiration. In my opinion, this must be the real reason that for years no progress has been made, in spite of plenty of empty boasting. For years there have been numerous examples of immorality. My values do not allow me to speak about them openly, although their perpetrators have received their share of tolerance. Despite this, attempts continue to be made to label innocent people as backward fanatics who support theocratic regimes. Fundamentalism is another fashionable term with which to smear them. Moreover, Islam has been accused of not keeping up with the times. We frequently observe with sorrow today that those who did nothing more than express their religious feelings have been branded as reactionaries, fanatics, and fundamentalists. Unfortunately, some people do not distinguish between being truly religious and blind fanaticism. It is not possible to talk about common ideas or a collective consciousness in communities where individuals do not look upon one another with tolerance, or in countries where the spirit of forbearance has not become fully entrenched. In such countries, ideas will devour one another in the web of conflict. The work of thinkers will be futile, and in such countries it will not be possible to establish sound thought or freedom of belief or thought. These things will not be allowed to flourish. In fact, it cannot be said that in such a country the state has been based on a true system of justice. Even if this appears to be the case, it is nothing more than a sham. Actually, in a place where there is no tolerance, it is not possible to talk about a healthy media, scholarly thought, or pertinent cultural activities either. What we see when we look at the things that carry such names are only some fruitless, one-sided efforts made according to certain thoughts and a certain philosophy. Expecting something fresh, beneficial, and promising for the future from these is futile. Tolerance in the life of the individual and society. First of all, I would like to indicate that tolerance is not something that was invented by us. Tolerance was first introduced on this earth by the prophets whose teacher was God. Even if it would not be correct to attribute tolerance to God, He has attributes that are rooted in tolerance, like forgiveness, the forgiveness of sins, compassion and mercy for all creatures, and the veiling of the shame and faults of others. The all-forgiving, the all-merciful, and the all-veiling of faults are among the most frequently mentioned names of God in the Quran. The golden age when tolerance was represented at its apex was the age of happiness. And I would like to give some true examples from that historical time, events that extend in a line from that period of roses until today. An example of forgiveness. As is known, in the historical event of slander, the hypocrites made slanderous accusations against Aisha, the chaste wife of the Prophet and the spiritual mother of all believers. Aisha has a special place among the pure wives of the Prophet because the Prophet was the first man she saw when she awakened to womanhood. In a period when she became fully conscious of her womanhood, Aisha became a member of the Prophet's pure household, and there she breathed only an atmosphere of chastity and honor. Aisha, an exemplar of chastity, became subjected to a planned slander campaign during this period. Both herself, her family, and the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, suffered much because of this slander. However, the verse revealed approximately 1 month later declared Aisha's unadulterated purity and innocence. However, her father Abu Bakr, who had been giving financial support to one of those who was involved in the slander, took an oath not to give any more support to this person. But the verse that was revealed warned that the most faithful friend of the Prophet, Sultan of Tolerance, should be more lenient. The verse reads, "Let not those among you who are endowed with grace and amplitude of means resolve by oath against helping their kinsmen, those in want, and those who have left their homes in God's cause. Let them forgive and overlook. Do you not wish that God should forgive you? For God is the all-forgiving, the all-merciful." An-Nur 24:22. I want to draw your attention in particular to the expression at the end of this verse. Do you not wish that God should forgive you? For God is the all-forgiving, the all-merciful. In reality, the all-merciful God, whose mercy is unequaled and compared to which all the mercy in the world is but a drop in the ocean, continually secrets himself and, in spite of everything, forgives us, forgives everything, from the unbecoming words that enter our ears and darken our spirits, to the filth that flows into us from the universe and back to the society that we have polluted. His question, "Do you not wish that God should forgive you?" directed at people like us who are always in need of purification, is very fine and sincere and worthy of being coveted. By means of this verse, God indicates that just as He forgives us, so too should we forgive one another for the mistakes we make, and this is illustrated to us as a Quranic virtue in the character of Abu Bakr. Forgiveness and tolerance are given great importance in the messages of the prophets, which are from divine and celestial sources. A prophet has the duty of educating and training others. In order for the truths that he is conveying to influence the hearts of others, his own heart must beat with forgiveness and tolerance. When some faults that are the result of a person's nature collide with the tolerant atmosphere of a person of truth, they melt and disperse like a meteor. Instead of splitting open someone's head, the legions of light, which resemble the lamps lit on nights of celebration, will soothe the eyes and give joy to the heart. As I mentioned before, there is in actual fact such a divine virtue recommended in our Prophet's hadith. Take on the virtue of God. Does not God Himself always forgive those who deny Him? On the cosmic plane, this crime is unforgivable murder and rebellion. But look at the vastness of God's forgiveness and pardon. In spite of the ungratefulness of His servants, He says, "Without doubt, my mercy precedes my wrath," and "My mercy extends to all things." Al-Araf 7:156. With His attribute of mercy, without showing any bias, He nurtures and protects all human beings and, indeed, all animate creatures, and He continues to give sustenance even to those who deny Him. Here it is possible to view all the prophets from the same perspective and present some examples from all of them. But let it suffice to give a few from Prophet Muhammad, the essence of existence, peace and blessings be upon him. Hamza was one of the companions whom the Prophet loved most. He was not just an ordinary companion. he was also the prophet's uncle, and they had both been nursed by the same wet nurse. Suppressing his honor and pride, this lion-hearted giant of a man entered the spiritual atmosphere of the pride of humanity, peace and blessings be upon him. Supporting his nephew and saying, "I am with you," at a critical time when the Muslims were weak in numbers, raised his value manifold. Thus, by demonstrating the qualities of his closeness on the spiritual plane as well as on the physical plane, he was able to reach what seemed to be an unattainable height of greatness. Of course, the loyalty of this great hero was rewarded by the Prophet. He was martyred one day while fighting at Uhud. His bloody murderers had sworn to raid Medina and to run every man and woman through. At the hands of his murderers, their hands, eyes, and thoughts bloody, Hamza was chopped into pieces. His sacred eyes were gorged out, his ears and lips cut off, his chest was split open, and his liver was torn out and bitten into. The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, whose bosom was full of compassion and mercy, looked at this horrifying scene, and his eyes filled with tears like clouds of rain. There were 70 martyrs at the Battle of Uhud. Twice as many again had been wounded. Women were widowed and children were orphaned. When he looked at this scene with the compassion of a prophet, it was almost unbearable. The children of Hamza and the children of other martyrs appeared before the prophet, shivering like newly hatched chicks. As related in his biographical works, no sooner than the thought, "in retribution for what they have done," had crossed his mind, was the following verse revealed. "And if you have to respond to any wrong, respond to the extent of the wrong done to you. But if you endure patiently, this is indeed better for he who endures." An-Nahl 16:126. In this verse, he was being directed to a horizon of understanding according to his level, and in other words, he was told, "You should not think like that." That son of leniency and tolerance, peace and blessings be upon him, buried all the pain in his chest and chose the road of patience. Actually, the prophet interwove the whole of his life, not only that moment, with tolerance. The polytheists did not spare him any torture or trouble. They drove him out of his homeland, formed armies, and attacked him. But even after the conquest of Mecca, when the pagans were anxiously waiting to see how they would be treated, as a sign of his vast compassion and mercy, the prophet said, "I speak as Joseph spoke to his brothers. There is no reproach for you today, because of your previous acts. God will forgive you also. He is the most merciful of the merciful. Go. You are free." The Quran is the source of leniency and tolerance, because these concepts have flowed to us like an exuberant stream from the conveyor of the Quran, peace and blessings be upon him. We cannot think any differently on this matter. Any contrary idea would mean that we do not know the Quran and God's messenger. From this perspective, because tolerance derives from the Quran and the Sunnah, it is a Muslim's natural virtue, and, because of the sources it is derived from, it is permanent. The covenant that the messenger of God presented to the Christians and Jews is truly worthy of attention. The original text of the covenant is preserved today in England. Compared to the principles that our prophet put forth, humanity today has not attained his level, neither with the declarations of human rights put forth in The Hague or Strasbourg, nor that in Helsinki. That man of great forbearance lived together closely with the people of the book in Medina. In fact, he was even able to find points of agreement with the dark souls who, even though they said, "We are Muslims," continuously caused friction everywhere and tried to play those with clear consciences one against another. He embraced them by means of forbearance. Upon the death of Abdullah ibn Ubay, who had been a lifelong enemy, the prophet even gave his shirt as a burial shroud, saying, "As long as there is no revelation forbidding me, I will attend his funeral." And he showed his respect to the deceased. There is no message similar or equal to the message given to humankind by Prophet Muhammad. Thus, it is not possible for those who try and follow the most beautiful example to think differently from what he thought. In this respect, it is not possible to think of tolerance as something that is separate from us. It is a different color and tone of our feelings and thoughts. From this time on, platforms for tolerance should be developed in our society. Tolerance should be rewarded. It should be given precedence at every opportunity, and those who behave with forgiveness to others should have a chance to express themselves. Tolerance Awards. Gathering around these ideas and feelings, the Journalists and Writers Foundation formed a committee and recently gave awards for tolerance to people who had been seen as having made a significant contribution to social reconciliation. This action was approved of by almost every segment of society, from politicians to people involved in the arts, from academics to journalists, writers, and the people in the street. Of course, a marginal group that was not synchronized with the general public due to their different worldview expressed their displeasure at an activity that everyone else had embraced. They had made the mistake of reproaching the individuals and institutions that said yes to this consensus. But let them say what they will. At a time when the world has become like a large village, and at a point when our society is on the verge of great change and transformation, if we are talking about dialogue with other nations, then it will not be possible to explain away our disagreements with one another. In this respect, tolerance is a matter that needs to be rewarded, and for this reason, tolerance must permeate all of society. So much so that universities should breathe tolerance, politicians should talk about tolerance, people in the music world should write lyrics about tolerance, and the media should give support to positive developments concerning tolerance. Tolerance does not mean being influenced by others or joining them. It means accepting others as they are and knowing how to get along with them. No one has the right to say anything about this kind of tolerance. Everyone in this country has his or her own point of view. People with different ideas and thoughts are either going to seek ways of getting along by means of reconciliation, or they will constantly fight with one another. There have always been people who thought differently to one another, and there always will be. It is my humble opinion that those people who are the mouthpiece for certain marginal groups that neither affirm the divine scriptures God sent nor the realities of today, and who start fights at the drop of a hat, should review their position one more time. Are they making their claims for the sake of human values or for the sake of destroying human values? Today, more than anything else, our society is in need of tolerance. In fact, our nation should have this dynamic today and should give it priority. It should represent tolerance to the world because our glorious ancestors captured the hearts of people by means of tolerance and became the protectors of the general peace. The longest period of peace in the Balkans and the Middle East, which have always been volatile areas, was realized with the enduring tolerance of our ancestors. From the moment that tolerance and those great representatives left history, this region became void of peace and contentment. Thanks to the grace of God, after several centuries of life in limbo, this great nation has begun walking toward resurrection. This great plane tree, the leaves of which are beginning to bud in the bosom of Anatolia, with the grace and bounty of God, should once more breathe tolerance itself and teach others to breathe tolerance. At the same time, our citizens in European countries can only live in harmony in those countries by means of a vast atmosphere of tolerance. Here, I would like to underscore one point. Being tolerant does not mean foregoing the traditions that come from our religion, or our nation, or our history. Tolerance is something that has always existed. The Ottomans were faithful both to their religion and to other values, and at the same time, they were a great nation that could get along with other world states. If the people of today, who are civilized, enlightened, and open to the world, are going to fall short of those who lived in that period, then this means they have not understood this age. In this respect, as individuals, as families, and as a society, we have to speed up this process that has already begun. I personally believe that even the people who do not share our feelings and thoughts will soften when we go to see them. Thus, in the name of dialogue, we can unite on common ground and shake hands with all. This is because the things that God gives most value to are human beings, love, and compassion. The value the messenger of God gave to humanity. More than anything else, with the training he received from his Lord, the pride of humankind gave value to every human being, regardless of whether that person was a Muslim, Christian, or Jew. Before leaving this subject, it would be beneficial to see what kind of a visionary man he was. He was the pride of humanity. His spirit was the beginning of the book of existence, and his message was the end. This is self-evident to those who know the prophet's mission. We know him as one by whose light the universe can be observed and read like a book. However much humankind, the prophet's followers in particular, take pride in their connection with the prophet of mercy, it is not too much. As one who loved him said, "How fortunate we are to be connected with him." In fact, regarding the great blessing he received, the messenger of God said, "The first thing God created, the first seed that was sown in the bosom of non-existence, was my light." This is true because he is the seed, the essence, and the summary of existence. If we express this same sentiment in Sufi terms, the existence of Muhammad was both the reason for creation and its final goal. Existence was created for him to be able to come into it as the embodiment of all human values and as a theater in which all the manifestations of God's names would be apparent. As I have mentioned at other times in different contexts, the pride of humanity, the reason for creation and the Prince of Prophets, one day stood up as a Jewish funeral was passing by. One of the companions at his side said, "O Messenger of God, that's a Jew." Without any change in attitude or alteration of the lines on his face, the Prince of Prophets gave this answer, "But he is a human being." May the ears ring of those followers who do not know him in these dimensions, and those human rights advocates who are ignorant of the universal message he brought in the name of humankind. There is nothing I can add to these words, but if we are disciples of the glorious prophet who spoke these words, it is not possible for us to think any differently. Thus, it would be beneficial for those who oppose the recent activities made in the name of dialogue and tolerance to review their situations in respect to their heedlessness or their obstinacy that has permeated their personalities and spirits. Tolerance and democracy. Democracy is a system that gives everyone who is under its wing the opportunity to live and express their own feelings and thoughts. Tolerance comprises an important dimension of this. In fact, it can be said that democracy is out of the question in a place where tolerance does not exist. But come and see some of those who, on the one hand, talk about democracy, but who at the same time want the source that nurtures it to dry up. In a democratic country, everyone should be able to take advantage of democratic rights and responsibilities. If one segment of society becomes upset by the existence of another segment, then it is obvious that those who are upset are not sincere, to say the least, in their claim that we are Democrats and supporters of democracy. As I mentioned above, it is not possible for democracy to take root in a place where there is no tolerance. In fact, advocates of democracy should be able to accept even those who do not share their views, and they should open their hearts to others. Here it is beneficial to stress this point. Accepting all people as they are, regardless of who they are, does not mean putting believers and unbelievers on the same side of the scales. According to our way of thinking, the position of believers and unbelievers has its own specific value. The pride of humanity has a special position, and his place in our hearts is separate from and above all others. In relation to this point, I would like to inform you of my feelings. After returning from a visit to the resting place of our prophet, I was very sad that I had not died there. I thought that if I really loved him, then I should have clung to the iron railing and died on the spot. Until that day, I had thought that my attachment to the prophet was that great. Of course, he has a very high place in our hearts, and we would not want anyone to harm him in any way. But even though I have such strong feelings and thoughts about him, this does not prevent me from entering into dialogue with someone who does not think or believe the same. Tolerance and the future. Even if we have different feelings and thoughts, we are all people of this society. Even though we may not have common grounds on some matters, we all live in this world, and we are passengers on the same ship. In this respect, there are many common points that can be discussed and shared with people from every segment of society. In all probability, time will clarify everything and prove that those who started the trend of tolerance were right. Again, time will discard feelings and thoughts of grudge and vengeance. Only feelings fed with love, forgiveness, tolerance, and dialogue will continue. People of tolerance will build a world based on tolerance. Those whose lot is not tolerance will drown in their malice, hatred, and anger in the well of intolerance. It is my wish that people such as these will wake up and not drown in the swamp into which they have fallen. Or else we will have to cry for them as well. I can already feel this pain, and I am greatly grieved by it. Making the atmosphere of tolerance permanent. In addition to our lost paradise, we have also lost some of our exalted characteristics. Knowledge, research, work method, organization of the workplace, helping one another, and reading the book of the universe are some of the things we have lost. Among the many things we have lost, perhaps the first and most important is tolerance. From this word, we understand embracing people regardless of differences of opinion, worldview, ideology, ethnicity, or belief. It also means putting up with matters we do not like by finding strength in a deep conscience, faith, and a generous heart, or by the strength of our emotions. From another approach, it means, in the words of the famous Turkish poet Yunus, loving the created simply because of the Creator. Loving the created simply because of the Creator. Love is the reason for existence and its essence, and it is the strongest tie that binds creatures together. Everything in the universe is the handiwork of God. Thus, if you do not approach humanity, a creation of God, with love, then you will have hurt those who love God and those whom God loves. For example, being an opponent of the paintings of an artist like Picasso will hurt both Picasso and those who admire him. Another example would be to remain indifferent to the grace of the Alhambra Palace, the lines of grace that express the ways from the finite to the infinite. This would be to show disrespect to that masterpiece and its artists. In the same way, every aspect of the universe's mind-boggling beauty, grandeur, and splendor is an example of God's artistry. In this respect, humans, animals, and other animate creatures, and in fact, all the inanimate objects as well, were created with a nature that is worthy of being embraced by us with love. Showing indifference or being condescending to them means showing indifference and acting with condescension to the Maker. On the contrary, our approach to creation and other human beings should be based on loving them for the sake of their Creator. If Muslims talk about weapons, armories, killing, and the butchering of others, and if by doing so they put vast distances between people, then this means that in fact we have been far removed from our essence. But we should be thankful that at a time when there are signs of the paradise we have lost, we have also found tolerance again. This is one of the characteristics that we had lost. We are rediscovering tolerance, something that is inherent in the spirit of Islam and something that was explained to us in the Quran and by the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. In the matter of tolerance, our people have welcomed the activities involved with tolerance and have warmly embraced this spirit. This is of vital importance. Along with the institutions that have been established, the voluntary services provided by people have aroused a great deal of interest. The Quran states, "On those who believe and work deeds of righteousness will the All-Merciful bestow love." Maryam, 19:96. In other words, both inhabitants of the sky and inhabitants of the earth will love them. As expressed in a hadith, God tells those in the sky which people he loves and orders them too to love these beloved ones. When the angels in the sky love them, the people on earth love them too. The seed that has been sown by tolerance is growing. It will blossom when the time is right. Of course, this depends to a certain extent on the newspapers, TV, magazines, and foundations giving the appropriate support. There is no turning back from the road of tolerance. Acceptance in the heavens always brings about an affirmative response on earth. The signs of this are obvious. The most obvious signs are that doors everywhere are opened wide in the name of acceptance to heroes of love and tolerance. It can be said that tolerance is on its way to growing and flourishing. This is true to such an extent that after the season of tolerance began, conflicts were staged to disrupt these developments. But sides that for years had been seen and shown as being separate reacted with great farsightedness, and a calamity was averted. I think it is probable that from now on, many other intrigues will take place and attempts will be made to disturb the general peace. However, we, who have begun this process, must be determined to carry it through to the end. We have to be determined and act in accordance with the way indicated in the Quran. Those who witness no falsehood, and when they meet hollow words or unseemly behavior, they pass them by with dignity. Al-Furqan 25:72. Everyone reflects their own character with their actions. It is the duty of perfected people to act leniently. If one ridicules the Quran and makes light of prayer, fasting, and chastity, this behavior should be considered as an indication of the style and character of that person. But as believers, we must not be aggressive or ridicule people, even toward those who act in a disagreeable manner. We should not return aggressiveness and ridicule in kind. Another verse says, "Tell those who believe to forgive those who do not look forward to the days of God." Al-Jathiyah 45:14. This is actually the voice of our conscience. When you see a blind man, do you kick and beat him, or do you take his hand and show him the way? From this point of view, the duty that befalls the makers of ideas for tomorrow is to bring harmony to the incongruities in society, to protect the balance that is under attack, and to view unpleasant incidents with far-sightedness. Just as is said in the Turkish saying, "Take what is pleasant and leave what causes grief," we should remain indifferent to unpleasant things and not cause any conflicts or disturbances. If we can continue like this, then in a short time it will be possible to go much further than where we are now. Of course, there will be many attempts made, domestically and abroad, to destroy this balance. But for the sake of the continuation of tolerance, we will die many times and be born again in the efforts to prevent this. There will be floods of love everywhere, and love will flow from the eyes and hearts of people. Everyone will embrace one another with love, and, God willing, the 21st century will be called the Age of Tolerance. I am so eager for this to come about that 1 or 2 years of tolerance is not enough for me. We are determined that there will be 1 or 2 centuries of tolerance. In fact, we want tolerance to last until the end of time. We want to experience eras of tolerance, and we have no intention of turning back from this road. The 2 roses of the Emerald Hills: Tolerance and Dialogue. Dialogue means the coming together of 2 or more people to discuss certain issues, and thus the forming of a bond between these people. In that respect, we can call dialogue an activity that has human beings at its axis. Undoubtedly, everyone is rewarded according to their sincerity and intention. If people direct their actions with sincerity and with good intentions, they may be winners even if others should consider them losers. The Prophet of God said, "Deeds are judged by intentions," and he emphasized that the intention of the believer is more important than the act itself. If the deed is founded upon good intentions, it will turn out well. So whatever one may do, one must first be sincere in one's intentions and seek the approval of God. Thus, one should not ill-judge or slander the ties that are being established between various groups in the name of love, dialogue, and tolerance. Society cannot endure more tremors after having suffered so many wounds and after having been shaken so many times. If anti-democratic concentrations of power become the unshakable burden of this nation, and logic and judgment are supplanted through the power and means available to these concentrations, then this noble nation might not be able to recover again. As a result of such a calamity, this heaven-like land may be pushed 15 or 20 years back. It is possible that we might lose some things, that we might long for these lost things, even if they were to be among those things that we criticize today. In that respect, if we start our efforts for dialogue with the belief that peace is better, El-Nisa 4:128, then we must demonstrate that we are on the side of peace at home and abroad. Indeed, peace is of the utmost importance to Islam. Fighting and war are only secondary occurrences which are bound to specific reasons and conditions. In that respect, we can say that if an environment of peace where all can live in peace and security cannot be achieved in this land, then it would be impossible for us to do any good service for society or for humanity. Misconceptions about Islam. If we approach the issue from a different perspective, Muslims have from time to time been misunderstood, and as a result, they have been subjected to pressure and insults. We have even witnessed Muslims being deprived of their most natural and basic rights, for example, their right to work. This oppression that believing people has been subjected to is executed in the name of virtues like humanism, human rights, generosity, love, and tolerance. These are in fact characteristics of Islam. Yet, it is these very characteristics and virtues that are being used against people who believe, and these concepts are being exploited. Always there has been this basic attitude, an attitude that is subtle and deceitful, on the part of those who do not want to give room to Islam and Muslims to exist, either here or abroad. Things that have been claimed are not true. A Muslim can never be a bigot. Even if some people with such characteristics may have appeared within the Islamic community, it is unthinkable to conceive of all Muslims as being distant from understanding and tolerance. Indeed, to this day, what harm have the Muslims done, and what evil have they committed, and against whom? Despite their good intentions, some people have always been falsely stereotyped and have been weighed up on faulty scales. They have become the scapegoats for various accusations in the name of love, tolerance, freedom, and democracy. Despite being at the receiving end of all of these false accusations, real Muslims never injure anyone and satisfy themselves merely by stating the fact that they are not the way they have been imputed to be. Still, a certain group has never ceased to attack them. Indeed, beauty has always sprung from the pure and blameless souls of the Muslims and the holy and exalted sources that are in their hands. It cannot be any other way. In the Quran, the Sunnah, and in the pure and learned interpretations of the great scholars, there is no trace of a decree or an attitude that is contrary to love, tolerance, or dialogue in the sense of meeting with all, and declaring and expressing our emotions or thoughts. We cannot conceive of a religion that wills the good of all and who calls all, with no exception, to salvation as being otherwise. The following verses in the glorious Quran express this truth perfectly. And if you behave tolerantly, overlook and forgive, then verily God is forgiving and merciful. At-Taghabun 64:14. God does not forbid you regarding those who did not fight you on account of religion and did not drive you out of your homes to show kindness and deal with them justly. Al-Mumtahina 60:8. Tell those who believe to forgive those who do not look forward to the days of God, in order that he may recompense each people according to what they have earned. Al-Jathiyah 45:14. Indeed, when we look at the Quran, we see that it is molded in love. In that respect, believing hearts must reclaim these beauties which are already ours, changing the negative image of Muslims. This negative image has been fed to the world, and now we must once more communicate the essential facet of Islam to those who are presumed to be civilized, using the principle of gentle persuasion. Let there be endless thanks to the excellent Just One who feeds us with his bounty, for the devotees of truth and heroes of love who have been carrying messages of love, tolerance, and dialogue all over the world, and who are trying to build the new image of the Muslim, with hearts full of love. Seeking the approval of God. I would like to stress the fact that Muslims will lose nothing by employing dialogue, love, and tolerance. Muslims continuously seek the approval of God. This is the greatest gain of all. In that respect, things that may appear as losses to some people are seen as gains by Muslims, while certain other events may actually be detrimental even when they appear to be lucrative. Moreover, we have no doubts concerning Islam, its holy book the Quran, or its most glorious representative, the pride of humanity, peace and blessings be upon him. We know that Islam will certainly continue on the path that leads to the future, despite all obstacles. Every subject of the Quran is proven by reason. It is a book that is strong enough to solve all problems of the future. The Prince of the Prophets, a man about whom Bernard Shaw said, he would solve the problems of the modern world that would bring it the much-needed peace and happiness, was sent to humanity in order to present the solutions for all of its problems until Judgment Day. As in previous centuries, the problems of our age and the coming ages, which seem to be far removed from a sound solution, will be solved by the architects of hearts and minds who base their solutions on these holy sources. Indeed, we do not need to have any worries, as we believe that the illuminating expressions and statements of the Holy Quran and our Prophet offer lasting solutions to a myriad of problems. In my opinion, those who are equipped with these torches will suffer no loss, with the help and bounty of God, wherever they may go in the world and with whomever they may enter into dialogue. Thus, there is no cause for concern. The important fact here is that we should understand the sources that we possess, and we should employ them as necessary. Moreover, we should not abuse them by associating them with our own faults, our bodily or earthly desires. With their assistance and guidance, we should seek only the approval of God and the afterlife. Indeed, just as we have not even the slightest doubt concerning the Quran and the Prophet of God, and just as we have no doubts concerning their justice, there is no reason why anyone should have doubts about us. But if there still are some people who are frightened due to groundless fears, they will only be those people who are worried about the reliability of the dynamics and sources on which they rely. Without hands against those who strike you, without speech against those who curse you. From the day the Journalists and Writers Foundation was established until now, even if things have not always been as we would have wished, we can say that the Foundation has always organized important activities, but somehow I have never fully been able to participate in any of them. For this reason, I cannot claim a share in their success. For instance, it brought world-famous soccer players here to raise aid for Bosnia. Every year it has brought together special groups, like the one here tonight, to talk on various platforms, providing at the very least an exchange of ideas. The Foundation has suggested the ideas to be discussed, regardless of our personal ideas or opinions. As a result, we have seen with our own eyes that there is no reason to fear one another, and that everyone can meet with whomever they want. If we have not been able to come together before today, it only means that we have been obstructed by our mistaken conjectures and, as a result, neglected this important responsibility toward each other. The Foundation is known in Turkey mainly as a representative of tolerance. In fact, it has identified itself with tolerance. Whenever it is mentioned, tolerance is immediately mentioned afterwards. In fact, the Foundation's image has created much jealousy, causing several alternative organizations to appear. Now, fortunately, everyone is singing the same tune. For this reason, I believe that tolerance will spread faster to the grassroots, diffuse throughout the country, and, as an artist friend said, we will be able to walk head to head, heart to heart, and hand in hand toward a happy tomorrow, God willing. When the prophet was dying and about to pass over to the next world, he said, I place in your trust the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews. When Umar had been stabbed and was in the throes of death, he warned, I place the people of the book among us in your trust. Fear God regarding them and treat them justly. After defeating the enemy at Malazgirt, the Turkish commander Sultan Alparslan hosted the military chiefs and the ruler of the rival state in his tent. He then had them conveyed safely to their capital, Constantinople, now Istanbul, escorted by some of his officers. In Jerusalem, the commander and ruler, Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, went at night to the tent of Richard, the commander of the Crusaders' army, to treat his wounds, despite the fact that Richard's forces had killed thousands of Muslims. We are the children of a culture that gave birth to such people. We are the heirs of the culture that has the world's broadest, most comprehensive, and most universal tolerance. This concept is spreading today like the waves of the sea, reaching across the entire world. I fully believe that the coming years will be years of tolerance and love. In this framework, we will give the world much and we will receive much. Not only will we not be fighting our own people, we will not even be fighting other cultures, civilizations, or the people of other beliefs and worldviews. Issues that lead to argument and conflict will be completely resolved, and once again, by understanding the power of love, we will be able to open our hearts to all with love and compassion. With the help of God, we will be able to concentrate on the important matters of dialogue and tolerance, matters which today's world needs very much. When I saw Mr. Izzettin Doğan, I remembered an important event in Muslim history. Mentioning the Harajites who rebelled against the lawful government and gathered in Nahrawan to attack him, Caliph Ali said, It would have been unjust for us to attack them before they attacked us. We are a society nurtured by the culture of such leaders. At a time when we are in great need of tolerance, with the grace of God, every sector of society will stand up for tolerance and dialogue, and the good things that come from this will spread faster than ever hoped for in all directions. Maybe I am taking up too much of your time, but I cannot proceed without mentioning the anxiety I feel. Turkish society, which has been wrung by internal conflict at this time, has been awaiting tolerance. Upon finding it, when one step toward it was to have been made, the society responded by leaping forward 3 steps. But it also is obvious that certain weak and insignificant persons, by ranting and raving, have demonstrated their own weaknesses and have tried to show themselves as being strong by being destructive, lying in ambush to attack tolerance and attempting to blow up the bridges that lead to dialogue. We will face great tests now. Our nation, which has already passed through many trials, will face these future tests with solidarity among individuals and will overcome every obstacle on the path to social harmony. What we are seeking is very valuable. The goal of the tolerance and dialogue that we want to reach will be very expensive. Just as it is not easy to obtain precious and exclusive things, it is also difficult to protect them once they have been achieved. Attaining social harmony through dialogue and tolerance is a matter of achieving 2 valuable things in order to realize a third. God is going to test us in different ways so that we realize how great the values of these are and, accordingly, to force us to stand up for them. We will endure all these trials and say, as Yunus did, If harshness comes from the majesty of God, or generosity from His grace, both are delights to the soul. Both His blessings and His wrath are pleasing. We must be as if without hands against those who strike us, and without speech against those who curse us. If they try and fracture us into pieces even 50 times, we still will remain unbroken and embrace everyone with love and compassion. And, with love toward one another, we will walk toward tomorrow. I wish for this happy evening to be an occasion for mercy and forgiveness. I greet you all with my deepest respect. Islam, a religion of tolerance. Islam is a word derived from the root words silm and salame. It means surrendering, guiding to peace and contentment, and establishing security and accord. Islam is a religion of security, safety, and peace. These principles permeate the lives of Muslims. When Muslims stand to pray, they cut their connection to this world, turning to their Lord in faith and obedience, and standing at attention in His presence. Completing the prayer, as if they were returning back to life, they greet those on their right and left by wishing peace. Remain safe and in peace. With a wish for safety and security, peace and contentment, they return to the ordinary world once again. Greeting and wishing safety and security for others is considered one of the most beneficial acts in Islam. When asked which act in Islam is the most beneficial, the Prophet replied, "Feeding others and greeting those you know and those you do not know." Accusing Islam of terrorism. How unfortunate it is that Islam, which is based on this understanding and spirit, is shown by some circles to be synonymous with terrorism. This is a great historical mistake. Wrapping a system based on safety and trust in a veil of terrorism just shows that the spirit of Islam remains unknown. If one were to seek the true face of Islam in its own sources, history, and true representatives, then one would discover that it contains no harshness, cruelty, or fanaticism. It is a religion of forgiveness, pardon, and tolerance. As such saints and princes of love and tolerance as Rumi, Yunus Emre, Ahmed Yesevi, Bediüzzaman, and many others have so beautifully expressed. They spent their lives preaching tolerance, and each became a legend in his own time as an embodiment of love and tolerance. Jihad can be a matter of self-defense or of removing obstacles between God and human free choice. Our history is full of examples that show how this principle has been implemented in life. Of course, there are and should be occasions where war is unavoidable. However, the Quranic verses on jihad that were revealed for particular conditions have been generalized by some short-sighted individuals. Whereas in actual fact war is a matter of secondary importance, it has been given priority as an essential issue by these people. Such people do not understand the true meaning and spirit of Islam. Their failure to establish a proper balance between what is primary and what is secondary leads others to conclude that Islam advocates malice and hatred in the soul, whereas true Muslims are full of love and affection for all creation. Regarding this, how apt is the following couplet. Muhammad was born out of love. What can be born out of love without Muhammad? Love is the essence of creation. The pride of humanity was a man of love and affection. One of his names was Habibullah, the beloved of God. In addition to meaning the one who loves, Habib means one who is loved, one who loves God, and one who is loved by God. Sufi masters like Imam Rabbani, Maulana Khalid, and Shah Waliullah state that love is the ultimate station of the spiritual journey. God created the universe as a manifestation of His love for His creatures, in particular humanity, and Islam became the fabric woven out of this love. In the words of Bediüzzaman, love is the essence of creation. Just as a mother's love and compassion compels her to allow a surgeon to operate on her sick child to save his or her life, jihad allows war, if needed, to preserve such fundamental human rights as the right to life and religious freedom. Jihad does not exclusively mean war. Once a friend said to me, "Without exception and regardless of differences in faith, you meet with everyone, and this breaks the tension of Muslims toward probable opponents. But it is an Islamic principle to love those things or people who must be loved on the way of God, and dislike those things or people who must be disliked on the way of God." Actually, this principle is often misunderstood, for in Islam, all of creation is to be loved according to the rule of loving on God's way. Disliking on the way of God applies only to feelings, thoughts, and attributes. Thus, we should dislike such things as immorality, unbelief, and polytheism, not the people who engage in such activities. God created humanity as noble beings, and everyone, to a certain degree, has a share in this nobility. His messenger once stood up out of respect for humanity as the funeral procession of a Jew passed by. When reminded that the deceased was a Jew, the prophet replied, "But he is a human," thereby showing the value Islam gives to humanity. This action demonstrates how highly our prophet respected every person. Given this, the involvement of some self-proclaimed Muslim individuals or institutions in terrorist activities can in no way be approved of by Islam. The reasons for this terrorism should be sought for in the actions themselves, in false interpretations of the faith, and in other factors and motives. Islam does not support terror, so how could a Muslim who truly understands Islam be a terrorist? If we can spread the Islamic understanding of such heroes of love as Niazi Mizri, Yunus Emre, and Rumi globally, if we can extend their messages of love, dialogue, and tolerance to those who thirst for this message, then everyone will run toward the embrace of love, peace, and tolerance that we represent. The definition of tolerance in Islam is such that the Prophet even prohibited verbal abuse of unbelievers. For example, Abu Jahil died before embracing Islam, despite all the Prophet's efforts. His unbelief and enmity toward the Prophet was such that he deserved the title Abu Jahil, father of ignorance and impudence. His untiring opposition to Islam was a thorn in the side of the Muslims. Despite such hostility, when in an assembly of companions where Abu Jahil's son Ikrimah was present, the Prophet one day admonished a companion who had been heard insulting Abu Jahil. "Do not hurt others by criticizing their fathers." Another time he said, "Cursing your mother and father is a great sin." The companions asked, "O Messenger of God, would anyone curse their parents?" The Prince of Prophets replied, "When someone curses another's father and the other curses his father in return, or when someone curses another's mother and the other does the same in return, they will have cursed their parents." While the Prophet of Mercy was inordinately sensitive when it came to respecting others, some Muslims today justify unpleasant behavior on the basis of religion. This shows that they do not understand Islam, a religion in which there is no place for malice and hatred. The Quran strongly urges forgiveness and tolerance. In one verse, it says of pious people, "They swallow their anger and forgive people. God loves those who do good." Al-Imran 3:134. In other words, Muslims should not retaliate when verbally abused or attacked. If possible, as Yunus says, they should act as if they had no hand or tongue with which to respond and no heart with which to resent. They must swallow their anger and close their eyes to the faults of others. The words selected in the verse are very meaningful. Kazm, translated as swallowing, literally means swallowing something like a thorn, an object that actually cannot be swallowed. Thus, it denotes swallowing one's wrath, no matter how difficult. Another verse, while mentioning the characteristics of believers, says, "When they meet hollow words or unseemly behavior, they pass them by with dignity." Al-Furqan 25:72. When we look at the exalted life of God's messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, we see that he always practiced the precepts presented in the Quran. For example, a companion once repented of a sin and admitted, "I am guilty of fornication. Whatever my punishment is, give it and cleanse me." The Prince of Prophets said, "Go back and repent, for God forgives all sins." This event was repeated 3 times. Another time, a companion complained to the Prophet that someone had stolen his belongings. But as the punishment was about to be carried out, the companion said, I have changed my mind and do not want to pursue my case. I forgive this individual." The prophet asked, "Why did you bring this matter to court? Why didn't you forgive him from the outset?" When such examples are studied from their original sources, it is clear that the method of those who act with enmity and hatred, those who view everyone else with anger, and who blacken others as infidels, is non-Islamic, for Islam is a religion of love and tolerance. A Muslim is a person of love and affection who avoids every kind of terrorist activity and who has no malice or hatred for anyone or anything. Islam as a religion of universal mercy. Life is the foremost and most manifest blessing of God Almighty, and the true and everlasting life is that of the hereafter. Since we can deserve this life only by pleasing God, He sent prophets and revealed scriptures out of His compassion for humanity. While mentioning His blessings upon humanity, He begins, "All-merciful, He taught the Quran, created humanity, and taught it speech." Al-Rahman 55, 1-4. All aspects of this life are a rehearsal for the afterlife, and every creature is engaged toward this end. Order is evident in every effort, and compassion resides in every achievement. Some natural events or social convulsions may seem disagreeable at first, but we should not regard them as being incompatible with compassion. They are like dark clouds or lightning and thunder that, although frightening, nevertheless bring us the good tidings of rain. Thus the whole universe praises the All-Compassionate. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is like a spring of pure water in the heart of a desert, a source of light in an all-enveloping darkness. Those who appeal to this spring can take as much water as needed to quench their thirst, to become purified of their sins, and to become illuminated with the light of faith. Mercy was like a magical key in the prophet's hands, for with it he opened hearts that were so hardened and rusty that no one thought they could be opened. But he did even more. He lit a torch of belief in them. The compassion of God's messenger encompassed every creature. He desired that everyone be guided. In fact, this was his greatest concern. Yet it may be, if they believe not in this message, you will consume, exhaust yourself, following after them with grief. Al-Kahf 18:6. But how did he deal with those who persisted in oppression and persecutions, those who did not allow him and his followers to worship the one God, those who took up arms against him to destroy him? He had to fight such people, yet his universal compassion encompassed every creature. This is why, when he was wounded severely at the Battle of Uhud, he raised his hands and prayed, "O God, forgive my people, for they do not know." The Makkans, his own people, inflicted so much suffering on him that he finally emigrated to Medina. Even after that, the next 5 years were far from peaceful. However, when he conquered Mecca without bloodshed in the 21st year of his prophethood, he asked the Meccan unbelievers, "How do you expect me to treat you?" They responded unanimously, "You are a noble one, the son of a noble one." He then told them his decision, "You may leave, for no reproach this day shall be on you. May God forgive you. He is the most compassionate." 825 years later, Sultan Mehmed II said the same thing to the defeated Byzantines after conquering Constantinople. Such is the universal compassion of Islam. The messenger displayed the highest degree of compassion toward believers. "There has come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is your suffering. Anxious is he over you, full of concern for you. For the believers full of pity, compassionate." At Tawbah 9:128. "Lower unto believers your wing of tenderness through mercy." El-Hijra 1588. "Was the guardian of believers and nearer to them than themselves." El-Azab 33:6. When one of his companions died, he asked those at the funeral if the deceased had left any debts. On learning that he had, The prophet mentioned the above verse and announced that the creditors should come to him for repayment. His compassion even encompassed the hypocrites and unbelievers. He knew who the hypocrites were, but never identified them, for this would have deprived them of the rights of full citizenship that they had gained by their outward declaration of faith and practice. Since they lived among the Muslims, their denial may have been reduced or changed to doubt, thus diminishing their fear of death and the pain caused by the assertion of eternal non-existence after death. God no longer destroys unbelievers collectively, although he had eradicated many such people in the past. But God would never chastise them while you were among them. God would never chastise them as they begged forgiveness. Al-Anfal 8:33. This verse refers to unbelievers regardless of time and place. God will not destroy whole peoples as long as there are some who follow the messenger. Moreover, he has left the door of repentance open until the last day. Anyone can accept Islam or ask God's forgiveness, regardless of how sinful they consider themselves to be. For this reason, a Muslim's enmity toward unbelievers is a form of pity. When Umar saw an 80-year-old man, he sat down and wept. When asked why, he replied, God assigned him so long a lifespan, but he has not been able to find the true path. Umar was a disciple of God's messenger, who said, I was not sent to call down curses on people, but as a mercy. I am Muhammad, and Ahmed, the praised one, and Mukafi, the last prophet. I am Hashir, the last prophet in whose presence the people will gather, the prophet of repentance, the prophet for whose sake the door of repentance will always remain open, and the prophet of mercy. Archangel Gabriel also benefited from the mercy of the Quran. Once the prophet asked Gabriel whether he had any share in the mercy contained in the Quran. Gabriel replied that he did, and explained, I was not certain about my end. However, when the verse, one obeyed, and moreover trustworthy and secured, Et-Takwir 81:21, was revealed, I felt secure. The messenger of God was particularly compassionate toward children. Whenever he saw a child crying, he sat beside him or her and shared his or her feelings. He felt the pain of a mother for her child more than the mother herself. Once he said, I stand in prayer and wish to prolong it. However, I hear a child cry and shorten the prayer to lessen the mother's anxiety. He took children in his arms and hugged them. Once, when he hugged and kissed his grandson Hassan, Aqra ibn Habis told him, I have 10 children, none of whom I have ever kissed. God's messenger responded, One without pity for others is not pitied. According to another version, he added, What can I do for you if God has removed compassion from you? He said, Pity those on the earth, so that those in the heavens will pity you. Once when Sa'd ibn Ubadah became ill, God's messenger visited him at home. Seeing his faithful companion in a pitiful state, he began to cry and said, God does not punish because of tears or grief, but he punishes because of this. And he pointed to his tongue. When Uthma ibn Madun died, he wept profusely. During the funeral, a woman remarked, Uthman flew like a bird to paradise. Even in that mournful state, the Prophet did not lose his balance and corrected the woman. How do you know this? Even I do not know this, and I am a prophet. A member of the Benu Mukarin clan once beat his female slave. She informed the messenger of God, who then sent a message to the master. He said, You have beaten her without any justifiable right. Free her. Setting a slave free was far better for the master than being punished in the hereafter because of a wrong act. The messenger of God always protected and supported widows, orphans, the poor, and the disabled, even before his prophethood. When he returned home in the excitement from Mount Hira after the first revelation, his wife Hatijah told him, I hope you will be the prophet of this community, for you always tell the truth, fulfill your trust, support your relatives, help the poor and weak, and feed guests. His compassion even encompassed animals. We hear from him, A prostitute was guided to truth by God and ultimately went to paradise because she gave water to a poor dog dying of thirst inside a well. Another woman was sent to hell because she made a cat die of hunger. Once, while returning from a military campaign, a few companions removed some young birds from their nest to caress them. The mother bird came back and, not being able to find its babies, began to fly around, calling out for them. When told of this, God's messenger became angry and ordered the birds to be put back in the nest. While in Mina, some of his companions attacked a snake in order to kill it. However, it managed to escape. Watching this from afar, he remarked, "It was saved from your evil as you were from its evil." Ibn Abbas reported that God's messenger, upon observing a man sharpening his knife directly before the sheep to be slaughtered, asked him, "Do you want to kill it more than once?" His love and compassion for creatures differed from that of today's self-proclaimed humanists. He was sincere and measured in his love and compassion. He was a prophet raised by God, the creator and sustainer of all beings, for the guidance and happiness of conscious beings, humanity and jinn, and the harmony of existence. As such, he lived not for himself, but for others. He is a mercy for all the worlds, a manifestation of compassion. He eradicated all differences of race and color. Once Abu Dhar got so angry with Bilal that he insulted him. "You son of a black woman!" Bilal came to the messenger and reported the incident in tears. The messenger reproached Abu Dhar. "Do you still have a sign of jahiliyah, ignorance?" Full of repentance, Abu Dhar lay on the ground and said, "I will not raise my head," meaning that he would not get up, unless Bilal puts his foot on it. Bilal forgave him, and they were reconciled. Such was the bond of kinship and humanity that Islam created among a once savage people. Tolerance and dialogue in the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran always accepts forgiveness and tolerance as basic principles, so much so that the servants of the All-Merciful are introduced in the following manner. "And the servants of God the All-Merciful are those who move on the earth in humility, and when the ignorant address them, they say, 'Peace.'" Al-Furqan 25:63. "When they meet hollow words or unseemly behavior, they pass them by with dignity." Al-Furqan 25:72. "And when they hear vain talk, they turn away therefrom and say, 'To us our deeds, and to you yours.' Al-Qasas 28:55. The general gist of these verses is that when those who have been favored with true servanthood to God encounter meaningless and ugly words or behavior, they say nothing unbecoming, but rather pass by in a dignified manner. In short, everyone acts according to his own disposition. Al-Isra 17:84, and thus displays his or her own character. The character of heroes of tolerance is gentleness, consideration, and tolerance. When God sent Moses and Aaron to a man who claimed to possess divinity, as the Pharaoh had done, he commanded them to behave tolerantly and to speak softly. Taha 20:44. The life of the pride of humanity, peace and blessings be upon him, was led in an orbit of forgiveness and forbearance. He even behaved in such a manner toward Abu Sufyan, who persecuted him throughout his lifetime. During the conquest of Mecca, even though Abu Sufyan said he still was not sure about Islam, the messenger said, "Those who take refuge in Abu Sufyan's house are safe, just as those who take refuge in the Kaaba are safe." Thus, in respect of providing refuge and safety, Abu Sufyan's house was mentioned alongside the Kaaba. In my humble opinion, such tolerance was more valuable than if tons of gold had been given to Abu Sufyan, a man in his 70s, in whom egoism and chieftainship had become ingrained. In addition to being commanded to take tolerance and to use dialogue as his basis while performing his duties, the Prophet was directed to those aspects in which he had things in common with the people of the Book, Jews and Christians. "Say, O people of the Book, come to common terms as between us and you, that we worship none but God, that we speculate no partners with him, that we take not some from among ourselves for lords other than God. Al-Imran 3:64. In another verse, those whose hearts are exuberant with belief and love are commanded to behave with forgiveness and tolerance, even to those who do not believe in the afterlife. Tell those who believe to forgive those who do not look forward to the days of God. It is for him to recompense each people according to what they have earned. Al-Jathiyah 45:14. Those who consider themselves addressed by these verses, all devotees of love who dream of becoming true servants of God merely because they are human beings, those who have declared their faith and thereby become Muslims and performed the mandated religious duties, must behave with tolerance and forbearance and expect nothing from other people. They must take the approach of Yunus Emre, not to strike those who hit them, not to respond harshly to those who curse them, and not to hold any secret grudge against those who abuse them. Dialogue in the Mohammedan Spirit and Meaning. I do not like to make claims, and I have a poor memory, but in spite of this I can recite tens of verses, one after the other, that are concerned with forgiveness, dialogue, and opening one's heart to all. This demonstrates the all-embracing nature or universality of Islam. For example, the Quran states, "Peace is good." An-Nisa 4:128. The verse does not necessitate its being particular to a certain event, meaning, or framework. The rule is general. Moreover, does not the root of the noun Islam express soundness, surrender, peace, safety, and trust? Then it is not possible for us to be true Muslims without fully representing and establishing these characteristics. In addition to this, underlying the meaning of this sacred name is an essence that incorporates embracing all and approaching everything with love. But if we do not approach the subject in this spirit, then we cannot be considered as having understood Islam or having made its call or having represented it. In addition to rules that guarantee peace and security, there are also verses in the Quran related to attitudes that should be taken against criminals and people who cause anarchy and terror. For such people, there are legal sanctions, punishments, and retaliations. However, whether regarding verses and hadiths on these subjects or their implementations, if we do not take into consideration the conditions, if we do not separate the essence from the detail and the goal from the means, if we do not evaluate the verses in the context of the situation both before and after they were revealed, then we will always arrive at false conclusions. I can and do say that peace, love, forgiveness, and tolerance are fundamental to Islam. Other things are accidental. Yet, it is necessary to give priority to basic Muslim issues according to their degree of importance. For example, if God gives importance to love, if He has informed us that He loves those who love Him, and if He has given to the person He loved most the name Habibullah, that is, one who loves God and is loved by Him, then we have to take this as a fundamental principle. Rules like jihad against hypocrites and unbelievers are secondary matters that are necessitated by circumstances. Rules are tied to various reasons and conditions. If there are no such reasons, then the rules will not be enforced. Rules regarding things like execution, exile, and war have been tied to various reasons. What is essential here is explaining and conveying the principles of Islam with kind words and gentle behavior. Also, peace, justice, and stability are essential in Islam, war being a byproduct of circumstances and dependent on certain conditions. Unfortunately, those who ignore the essence and do so without taking into consideration the reasons for the secondary rules and regulations, those who, by reading the Quran in a matter of a crude kind of zahiris, emphasize violence, these people have not understood the rules, the reasons for them, nor their source, nor have they understood Islam. When the relevant reasons appear, of course the rules necessitated by the reasons become operative. For example, when foreign enemy armies attack our country, we will, of course, not be expected to sit passively in a corner and say to the attackers, "How nice of you to come." Look at the world in which we find ourselves. According to some news recently reported in one of the newspapers, bloody wars are continuing in 56 places in the world. There are still floods of tears and blood flowing in many parts of the world. In many of these wars, some of the countries that defend democracy and human rights are on both sides. In that case, opposing war means opposing a human reality. For this reason, the moment someone touches our democratic rights and freedoms, we are, of course, going to defend ourselves and fight when necessary. But as I mentioned at the beginning, these are secondary things. The basis of Islam is peace and embracing humankind with love. A call to the common word. Another aspect of establishing and maintaining dialogue is the necessity of increasing the interests we have in common with other people. In fact, even if the people we talk with are Jews and Christians, this approach still should be adopted, and issues that can separate us should be avoided altogether. For example, when the Quran calls the people of the book, it says, "O people of the book, come to a word that is common between us and you." What is that word? Let us not worship anything but God, because real freedom is realized only by being saved from being someone else's slave. When someone becomes a servant of God, they are rescued from being anyone else's slave. So come and let us unite on this matter. The Quran continues, "Let us not take some of us for lords." Al-Imran 3:64. What is meant here is that our primary common point is belief in God. Mentioning the messengership of Muhammad has not even been mentioned yet. In another verse, "Say to those who believe, let them forgive those who have no hope for the afterlife." What is being said here is, let those who do not believe in the afterlife and resurrection after death be forgiven, because God only rewards or punishes a people with what they have earned. Al-Jathiyah 45:14. That is, if someone is going to be punished, then God will punish them, and this matter does not concern anyone else. Another clear example of this issue is related in particular to our prophet who received a mild warning from God regarding the time he prayed against some guilty pagans. According to a report, a Bedouin Arab tribe requested that the messenger send them teachers of the Quran. The messenger sent them some, but they were ambushed and cruelly martyred at Bir el-Mauna, the well of El-Mauna. After this event, God's messenger prayed to God for their punishment. However, God revealed the following verse, "Not for you, but for God, is the judgment concerning my servants, whether he turns in mercy to them, or punishes them because they are indeed wrongdoers." Al-Imran 3:127-128. Today there is an interest in religion all over the world. In my opinion, representing faith with its true values has gained an even greater importance than before. Today there is a need for people who are virtuous, self-possessed, cautious, sincere and pure of heart, people who do not steal or think too highly of themselves, and who prefer the well-being of others to their own, and who have no worldly expectations. If society can educate people with these characteristics, then it means that a much better future is imminent. Dialogue with the people of the book. The attitudes of believers is determined according to the degree of their faith. I believe that if the message is put across properly, then an environment conducive to dialogue will be able to emerge in our country and throughout the world. Thus, as in every subject, we should approach this issue as indicated in the Quran and by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. God says in the Quran, "This is the book. In it is sure guidance, without doubt, to those who are God-conscious, pious." Al-Baqarah 2:2. Later on, these pious ones are identified as follows. who believe in the unseen, are steadfast in prayer, and spend out of what we have provided for them, and who believe in the revelation sent to you and sent before your time, and in their hearts have the reassurance of the hereafter. Al-Baqarah 2:3-4. Using a very gentle and slightly oblique style, the Quran calls people to accept the former prophets and their books. The fact that such a condition has been placed at the very beginning of the Quran seems to be very significant to me when it comes to talking about the establishment of a dialogue with Jews and Christians. In another verse, God commands, "And argue not with the people of the book, unless it be in a way that is better." Al-Ankabut 29:46. In this verse, the Quran describes the method and approach we should use and the behavior we should display. Bediüzzaman said some extremely significant words in order to clarify this. Those who are happy about their opponent's defeat in debate have no mercy. He explains the reason for this. You gain nothing by defeating someone. If you are defeated and the other person is victorious, then you would have corrected one of your mistakes. Debate should not be for the sake of ego, but rather to enable the truth to appear. When we look at political debates in which the only thought is to vanquish the other person, there can be no positive result. For the truth to emerge in a debate of ideas, such principles as mutual understanding, respect, and dedication to justice cannot be ignored. As a Quranic rule, debate can only take place in an environment that is conducive to dialogue. Reading the above verse 29:46 further, we notice that the condition, "unless it be with those who disbelieve and inflict wrong and injury," is placed. Wrong is also mentioned in another verse. It is those who believe and confuse not their beliefs with wrong that are truly in security, for they are on right guidance. Al-An'am 6:82. According to the interpretation of this above verse by the Prophet, associating partners with God is equal to unbelief in the sense that one has contempt for the universe. The greatest tyranny is to silence all the voices in one's conscience that express God. Tyranny also means committing an injustice against others, oppressing them, and imposing one's ideas onto others. In that respect, as tyranny includes both polytheism and unbelief, it is the greater sin. Every polytheist or unbeliever may not be a wrongdoer in the sense outlined above. However, those who oppress others, who arm themselves in the name of committing evil, and who violate the rights of other people and the justice of God, must be confronted within the framework of the law. When dealing with people of the book who are not oppressors, we have no right to behave violently against them, or to think about how to destroy them. Such behavior is non-Islamic, contrary to Islamic rules and principles, and it can even be said that it is anti-Islamic. Elsewhere in the Quran it is stated, "God does not forbid you, regarding those who did not fight you on account of religion and did not drive you out of your homes, to show kindness and deal with them justly." Al-Mumtahina 60:8. This verse was revealed when an emigrant lady called Esma asked the Prophet if she should meet with her polytheistic mother, who wanted to come from Mecca to Medina to see her daughter. The verse suggests that such a meeting was perfectly acceptable, and that Esma could also be kind to her mother. I leave it to your discretion as to what approach should be used toward those who believe in God, the Judgment Day, and the prophets. Hundreds of Quranic verses deal with social dialogue and tolerance, but care must be taken to establish balance in one's tolerance. Being merciful to a cobra means being unjust to the people the cobra has bitten. Claiming that humanism is more merciful than divine mercy is disrespectful to mercy and violates the rights of others. In truth, except in certain special cases, the Quran and the Sunnah always advocate tolerance. The shielding canopy of this tolerance extends not only to the people of the book, but in a sense, to all people. Sports and the process of dialogue. It is a fact that the concepts of democracy, peace, dialogue, and tolerance have spread and are now being taken seriously with expansion of communication networks throughout the world. In order for these concepts to become more widespread and for everyone to benefit from them, a number of responsibilities fall on all people, both as individuals and as societies. In connection with this matter, one important source of power and means of communication that can influence society is, without a doubt, sports. All manner of sports programs, indeed anything that pertains to sports, are instantly transmitted from one side of the globe to the other. Of course, there are other, more conventional ways to spread ideas, but by employing this means, we can help the ideas of dialogue and tolerance spread. Ideas that we believe to be so essential that they must be made known to everyone can be publicized by this means for the sake of the well-being of both our own people and all of humanity. For example, the 90 minutes spent on the field during a football match could be well utilized. The game itself will give pleasure to the spectators in the stands, and at the same time, without any objections, a number of human virtues could be easily displayed. It is important to utilize this 90 minutes in this way. For example, as was formerly done in sports matches, the victors and the defeated would come together, embrace, shake hands, and radiate sportsmanship to all around them. Such behavior would in time be reflected by the behavior of the people in the stands. This would be an important lesson to the people who occasionally feel inclined to burn their seats, curse one another, or even attack one another with weapons. For them, it would be highly beneficial to see and show the sports profession in a light that radiates good feelings and thoughts. Even if the spectators of today do not respect the fact that the players are shaking hands before leaving the stadium, in time, the behavior of the players will break the cycle of hate and vengefulness, or at least neutralize it. At this time, this is what the world desperately needs. Both internally and externally, certain people have a desire for conflict and have been brought up in an environment of conflict, and therefore they do not desire dialogue or the improvement of human relationships. It is for this reason that we must act very cautiously. In every task undertaken, there should be a certain meaning, sincerity should be sought, and reason and good judgment should be the priority. In addition, every profession should be given its due, and it should behave accordingly. An imam uses his voice in the mosque, but a film star, an actor, or an author does not act in the same way. The actor gives precedence to body language or acting ability, and the author to writing style and the writing of ideas in a literary way. This is how it should be. Otherwise, the impact of the message and its effect is diminished, and the message is of no benefit. The same thing is true for sports. An athlete should demonstrate his or her abilities through success, good behavior, and an exemplary lifestyle. Unfortunately, today the importance of some values has not been perceived. People have a greater need for religion than they do for bread and water, for the peace and security provided by religion, and for the guarantee of an afterlife. I believe that when these facts have been properly explained, then there will be no doubting this matter. There are many people throughout the world who want to do something in the name of Islam. But when this important subject is approached in a crude manner, hate is evoked in the place of love, and unbridgeable abysses appear between people. Yet, what is expected and needed is for Islam to be a bridge and a road between people, as well as a factor that breaches the abysses. If we do not respond to those who are extending their hands in order to express their love and respect, we will have become unlovable. In fact, we will cause some undesirable negative developments to occur. In short, we can say that as an important factor in realizing social dialogue and tolerance, sports can also be utilized, if done so in a well-thought-out manner.